Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
Judy.
I want to know what you thought.
I don't care about Judy Garland. Go.
Okay. So,
You love Judy Garland. I mean, this is the first time you've got to cinema before I have in a long time because you.
that was to see you, and then you dumped me. I thought I might as well have kind of come at my usual time.
Did you come there to see me before the film?
Yes.
Why do you think I was going to be there that early?
Because you always are.
Okay.
So I thought, this time I'll go and socialise.
But it's because it was Judy.
No, actually, no, because I've not. I mean, a couple of things really. I really don't like Renée Zellweger. So and just to say that actually she surprised me. I thought she was great. So there was one prejudice that went out the window really. I don't like these biographical films either. So that point of view has been reinforced by this film. It's not so much, I don't have a fan personality. I've never written anyone or waited backstage for anyone. But it is true that, Judy Garland is a feature of my childhood. So, as a family in the 70s, in Canada, her films would be on television all the time. And we loved them. Kind of my sisters and I, we all kind of loved Judy. Easter Parade and The Wizard of Oz and Me and My Gal and The Pirates and The Harvey Girls. I love them all. And I remember kind of, just being like 11 or something. And A Star is Born. It was the television premiere of A Star is Born. Or the network premiere or something. And it was in a channel that we didn't have, right. Because our reception only got 3 of the 4 channels that were available. So I remember going to my friend Louis' house, kind of panting with excitement. And then I think his mother wouldn't start the show until they finished dinner. So it was like, hurry up! She wouldn't turn the TV on until they finished dinner. So anyway, so she's definitely someone whom I've loved all my life, yeah? And, as I've gotten older, obviously you understand kind of different things about her. I remember, buying the Gerald Frank biography of hers that came out in the 70s. And, and then obviously kind of, when you realize you're gay and so on, then kind of the persona and the life and the songs, all have a particular meaning, right? So anyway, she definitely occupies that place in my consciousness, but I still wouldn't say I'm not one of these desperate fans or anything. Though that that sounds like I've got something about fans, and I don't. I just don't have that kind of mentality. I'm not going to wait for anyone, right? So and which also means that I won't go to everything that they do, or I won't buy all the albums or whatever. But I do think that as a film actress and performer, she's peerless. There's a famous story that's in one of the Garson Kanin books where, L.B. Mayer, who features in the film, is taking some important dignitary around, and he asks Garson Kanin, who do you think are the best actor and the best actress in the MGM lot? And he says Spencer Tracy and Judy Garland. And L.B. Mayer flips his wig, right? Because, the correct answer was Spencer Tracy and Garbo, right? Kind of, she's a musical performer. She doesn't do tragedy. But of course, I actually do think that she is, kind of, she makes everything believable. From putting on a show with Mickey to, like, these kind of plaintive songs about always being left out that are a feature of her early career, like, In Between or things like that. And, nobody's had to play cornier dialogue than she and Mickey Rooney, and they do sell it. Yeah, kind of, you believe in them. And I think that takes great skill. So, and I suppose kind of musically, Again, she's got her ups and downs. I mean, I love the 30s and 40s recording, particularly the big band 40s recording, because, you know, she is a great singer, and that means that often she can just harmonize under someone else, or she can just be like part of the band, right? So we tend to think of her in these grand show-stopping numbers that come at the end of her career when, you know, she's a concert performer, right? And tend to forget kind of everything else in between. So we tend to remember her at that point where her voice, yeah, I think her musicianship never left her, but her voice did, right? And the vibrato in the voice kept increasing and increasing. So anyway, all of this to say that I love her, you know. So, and I had not really been looking forward to the film.
What?
No,
It's all you've been able to talk about for 2 weeks.
No, I was saying we have to see it, and you know.
And you've been saying it with a glee, or is that glee because you thought I would hate it?
No, not at all. It's just really because, you know, kind of. I think a lot of friends were asking about, you know, when are we going to do a podcast on Judy, right?
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
you know,
right.
I love musicals.
Whenever we've seen a trailer for it over the last few weeks, you've been going, "Oh, we must see this."
Well, it's true, you know. So, but I was also kind of dreading it really because I really don't rate Renée Zellweger. She's got kind of, you know, a kind of a smirk. Like she does these things with her mouth where she purses it, and she's got tiny little eyes, you know, and she's very mannered, right? So I couldn't imagine her as being like Judy Garland, because the thing about Judy Garland on screen is that she's completely transparent, you know, like kind of, you know exactly what she's feeling. And actually I think the magic around her is that she's both transparent and theatrical. Yeah, so kind of, you know, she's creating effects with her voice or her gestures or her eye movements, and you know that she's creating them, and at the same time it feels like writing character, you know. So
how did you find Zellweger in this then?
Well, actually I thought she was great.
I thought she was fantastic.
You know, and
my familiarity with Judy Garland of this era is actually as the kind of the parodies of her. You know, like the kind of the wobbly voice and the kind of theatrical gestures and things. I don't know her at all as actually what she was like at this age. So in the performance that Renée Zellweger gave, I saw it as an impression, I suppose, but because I didn't have the real thing in my head to compare it with, it seemed extremely convincing and all that sort of thing. And so I kind of ignored, you know, what other people might have picked up on, I don't know. Didn't occur to me to sort of say, oh, this maybe isn't very realistic. I just took it as a kind of brand new character, really. How about you?
Well, I mean, I had seen the show. So the film is based on a show called End of the Rainbow, which was in London, and then it toured, and it came here to Birmingham with Tracy Bennett. And it wasn't a very good play, but it did offer this role. And Tracy Bennett is one of those like theatrical, you know, powerhouses, really. You know, she had the voice, and there's something about seeing it live with those songs, you know, that just kind of pierce you, really. They work, they're theatrical songs, really. And if you have a big voice or a voice that you can make big, you know, it's a show that works in spite of not being a very good show. So I kind of, you go in with a series of knowledges and expectations, and within that, I actually think it's a terrible film.
Really?
Yes, I do. I think the opening sequence with L.B. Mayer, yeah. I thought, you know, it was so badly done, so badly directed, so badly acted.
It's a very threatening scene on the set of Wizard of Oz, where he's telling her, I can't remember exactly what he's telling her, but there is definitely an air of sexual threat about it, and it's about she's saying, I'm tired, I haven't had sleep, I want to leave, I can't do this, that and the other, all the stuff that you know about Judy Garland, the way she was treated by the studio. And he's saying, you know, if you want to leave, but you'll just be a housewife.
Yeah.
And he kind of, gaslight isn't the right word, but he kind of mentally abuses her into sort of, you know, he says, well, your nose is wrong and your teeth are wrong, but your voice, it's your voice. And so, like, he's extremely cruel. There's nothing sympathetic to Louis B. Mayer in this.
I know.
Not that I'm necessarily arguing that there should be, but he's a bit of a caricature.
Yeah, he is. He is, and I think they used it as a structuring device in the film, and that was a mistake. I mean, it could have been a flashback, right? Like, all you need all those scenes for is to say, this is a child who was abused, yeah, and it was she was abused by adults giving her drugs so that she could work harder and making her reliant on them and starving her and all of those things that led her to being dependent on drugs and alcohol, right? So but you could have done that in like 30 seconds in some flashback. You didn't need to keep returning to it all the time. I don't think that...
I didn't mind them coming back, to be fair. The thing interested me more about those flashbacks was the way in which her life as a teenager was completely fake. So she has this birthday party, but it's not a real birthday party, it's for show. She's not allowed to eat the cake. Everyone there's an actor, it's just for the cameras. And when she dives into the pool, in contravention of she's had her hair done, she can't get it wet. So she decides, no, I'm going to dive into the pool and try and have some fun. The shot, I think, is really interesting, where it's revealed that this pool is a tank, and you see it from the side on, so it's like a stage tank, and you've got these lights and scaffolds, and so on the top, what you've been introduced to as a birthday party on some balcony in sort of LA is revealed to be a set like anything else. But she's in the middle of it, kind of having a moment of joy, isolated from everything in the water. I thought that was a wonderful shot. That was what was more interesting about those parts, more so than the thing about her being on drugs, being forced to be on drugs. Though, I mean, that's completely unavoidable as well. And that, I suppose, is the longer lasting effect that you see, because what you see of her as a 47-year-old woman is her dependence on drugs still, and her inability to sleep, and kind of ongoing sort of problem with food and things. I mean, right at the end when they're enjoying that cake, it takes her a while to enjoy that cake.
Yes. So I don't know. I mean, I think basically as a drama, what is it? On the one hand, it's about someone who's desperate to be a good mother and can't be, and who's got a central dilemma, as it's posited at the beginning, that basically in order to provide a home for her kids, she's got to leave her kids. But then not much is done with that. The other thing is about a performer who's a real performer who feeds off the audience, who the audience provides her with something that people don't. So you also get a sense of how she's used by everyone, I suppose. And also you get a sense of how she's got a special connection with a gay audience of that time. I think none of that is depicted with any complexity or I suppose to say that there's no skill would be wrong, but with no flair, yeah. So, I think for me it doesn't work kind of theatrically or dramatically. It's perfunctory. So it's not that it...
I don't know that there's no flair. I mean, one of the stage numbers that she does is the first one. I can't remember what the song is, but it's all done in a single take. And I think it is really beautifully orchestrated and directed. The camera's kind of close up on her face, moves around to the side, moves back out, and then it pulls out completely. And you see that, and you get this. It's like a 3.5 minute performance in its entirety that starts off close up and ends up pulled out with the band coming in and kind of turns into a big number, which I thought was pretty extraordinary. I thought it was which I loved. The one thing that I didn't like about the stage performances, most of them, is that they are so clearly studio recorded. The audio, it really doesn't quite fit until you get to Somewhere Over the Rainbow at the end, which to me sounds much more like it was recorded live.
Yes.
And that's when she's kind of I think that's when Renée Zellweger's performance is at its best, and she kind of like goes through the looking glass and kind of really accesses like a real sort of emotional kind of heart. I mean, I think there's heart throughout the film. I think you're right to say that it's not terribly complex. There are some pretty cliche things, though that's not to say they're not enjoyable. But but I think what it does have is a real emotional openness throughout. I think you feel the film throughout.
I think that comes from her, from Renée Zellweger, actually, and I agree with you that the Somewhere Over the Rainbow number is a terrific performance of it, and it works incredibly well. And I think, it's the one which most deviates from Garland's phrasing or tonality, or so and Renée Zellweger makes it very, very affecting. It's really touching what she does with it. The rest of the numbers for me, it's like they're like a problem, because this could just be me, But the other day I was watching What's My Line. Yeah, it's that show where performers who used to go to New York, like everybody's blindfolded, and they write their name on a board, and the panelists have to guess who the person is by asking questions, right? And of course, the thing about Garland is she had to use a bell, because of course, as soon as she opened her mouth, she would be instantly recognized, right? Kind of the most, she's one of those performers like Sinatra or something. You hear, and all of America would know who they are. So, so for me, the singing in this film, the fact that it's not her, and that it's not somebody like with a similar equivalence that is as, that has as good a musicianship as Garland does, I just find it's a problem, because Renée Zellweger's voice is just really so far, beneath what Garland's is, that for me it represents a problem. It's almost like kind of a depth of emotion, or a facet of emotion, that's not there, and that only is superseded or surmounted when she does, the signature song, which is Over the Rainbow, but which doesn't follow, any of the various Garland performances of it. This kind of the sweet, pure, bell-like tone of the movie, or kind of later, deeper, throatier versions that are much more dramatic, and but also have a much more vibrato in the voice. She makes it her own, and thus makes it kind of the most successful of those numbers.
I'm just looking up whether I'm right in that they were studio recorded, and I'm not sure that I am. Let me just. I'm on a Vanity Fair article. Yeah, here we go. So this is a Vanity Fair article called Renée Zellweger on Playing Judy Garland. If I could have run away, I would have. And she says, it says here, each of Zellweger's 6 musical numbers, including By Myself, which is the first song, I think, and Over the Rainbow, was performed live on set in front of an audience to the sound of a band playing in her earpiece while the cameras rolled in one take. So I was wrong, but they sound really separate to what she's actually, to the visuals.
Yeah, it doesn't connect. There's something about the limitations of the voice that just kind of.
It just sounded like the production to me. It sounded separate, but you may be right about the voice, but I think the one where it really comes together is Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and also when she's singing in the flat with I think it's the Andy Nyman character, that one of the gay couple.
Yes.
On the piano, she's singing "Come On, Be Happy." Is that it?
Yes. Get happy. Hallelujah. Come on, get happy.
Yeah, that's it. That was lovely. I'm very curious to find out what you thought of the encounter with the gay couple, and then they're coming back at the end.
Again, it felt obviously like historically accurate. She was one of the icons of the period for gay men. Gay audiences had a very special connection to her, partly because she kept floundering, for the obvious reasons, right? Kind of, so, this thing of being put down and getting up again, and kind of and being blocked and getting up again, and, being denied, and, kind of continuing is something that resonated, with the gay audience. And in fact, I suppose it's worth, repeating or underlining here, that her death is one of the things that sparked the gay riots at Stonewall and began the whole gay liberation movement. So, Is
that right?
That's right.
I didn't know that.
Yes. So...
In how so?
Well, because, there was that rage of, they killed poor Judy. They're not going to do it to us, and they fought back, right? So no, but it's true.
Okay. Did you think it was a fair portrayal of it? I suppose the question I want to ask is like, do you think it was cheap, or
no? I think
stereotypical,
I just thought it wasn't very well done. It did look cheap, if only because there were only 2 characters. Yeah. Like,
You think she might have been flooded?
Her stage door would have had hundreds of people, I'm sure, waiting there.
That did seem peculiar, because the whole thing is that the film is she's lost it in America, but in London, in England, people love her.
Yeah.
And there's these jokes about, well, the English are crazy.
Yeah.
But then when she gets to London, she's being mobbed and people want photos of her. You think the one place where you absolutely know she's going to be, the stage door after her show, there'll be more than 2 fans.
Yes, and to be honest, I don't think she ever lost it in America. The thing is, she couldn't get the big stages or the big gigs because she was uninsurable. That's what. So it wasn't that she had lost her audience.
No,
it's that no impresario would gamble with her because she probably wouldn't turn up, right?
Right, but she those shows happened in London rather than America for a reason,
because somebody, the impresario was willing to go ahead with it.
Yeah.
And Michael Gambon is completely wasted in that role.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, you see Gambon show up and you think, wow, fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's really got nothing to... I don't think I've ever seen an actor so badly used. Or so unused.
Yes.
I
mean, Rufus Sewell isn't given much to do either. It is like, I suppose, the Judy show. But, I think Renée Zellweger is great, but she still doesn't capture what makes Garland, kind of magical. I mean, obviously when people resort to words like magical, it means they're not describing things very well. But there was a book called My Judy Garland Life, which was written by Lucienne Freud's daughter. I forget now what her name is. But she talks about this experience of her boyfriend committing suicide in Oxford and her being in a catatonic state of depression. And basically what got her through it was just watching the Judy Garland television series, which was just concerts, her singing, but like there's 23 episodes of Judy Garland in concert, right? For this television series that she did in the early 60s. And she talks about, how she felt healed by it. Yeah, that kind of, she would just kind of keep, obsessively rewatching these episodes, and that there was something about, resilience and humanity and a connection, in those songs, and that singing of those songs that really kind of, connected with her, right? And that's the effect that she had on audiences, right? That it was like kind of this healing, empowering, communicative thing about, a full range of human experience, which included she's a very humorous person, but really also the depths of despair that, you could see that she'd lived through her drug addiction and so on. Yeah, I don't think the film conveys any of that.
Well, I think that might be a little bit unfair. Maybe I think it relies so heavily on Renée Zellweger's performance that it's all done through her. I don't think there's any kind of... I mean, I think you're right up to a point to say there's a very little cinematic flair, maybe with the 1 or 2 exceptions that I suggested in the numbers. But I mean, in terms of the film using cinematic technique to convey her struggles, her inner turmoil, that sort of thing, it's very light on that. It is all about her performance.
Yeah, and her performance,
is great, and I think she does convey.
She does, things. And actually, it's a very interesting performance because she looks nothing like Judy Garland. For one thing, she's like this blonde Amazon, and Judy Garland was like this tiny 5-foot person, right? But it's amazing how, she uses... So there's an aspect of impersonation, in the performance, but it's done very lightly or very subtly, So all of a sudden you'll get like a crunch of a face, that was a very typical kind of Judy Garland way of laughing, and the whole character kind of seems to come through, that moment of impersonation that then kind of gets dropped, So, you know, but there are little things that you recognize as kind of having belonged to the historical performer, you know, that is impersonation, but it's kind of impersonation as a means to get through a character rather than as an end in itself. You know, and she does it very well. You know, she really makes the character come alive, and she's very affecting with it. And actually, I had seen Judy, what's the Australian actress? There was a television series, a miniseries of Garland.
Right. Judy Davis?
Yes. Yeah. Judy Davis is fantastic playing Garland. And the thing about Judy Davis is, you know, she's a great actress, and she also has that kind of transparency. And also, you know, there's a thing about Garland, which is a kineticism, an energy. She always seems like alive, because there's always something in her that is moving, yeah? You know, which is also true of Judy Davis, yeah, and which is not true of Renée Zellweger. Yeah, Renée Zellweger is a very placid actress. So, you know, which I think maybe makes her performance all the greater, because she gets that in, right? And it's through those gestures that the performance comes alive. So, yeah, kudos to her. But I'm very disappointed in the movie.
The film cut out literally 2 seconds before the end. So the film ends on Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and actually there's a moment in Somewhere Over the Rainbow I want to pick up on, which is, it goes back to the gay couple, because one of their things is that they've got tickets to see every show that she's doing, and she stops doing the show. She's replaced by can't remember his name, guitarist
Lonnie
Donegan. And then, but she comes back. She said she just wants to see the show, but she comes back. She goes on stage. No one's expecting her, and she sings something, and then she sings Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and she breaks down in the middle of it and stops, and then the Andy Nyman character stands up and starts singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and then his partner does, and then other people in the audience do, and everyone starts singing it. And I thought, for me, the film just got away with making that work, because it is so cheesy.
It is
so unbelievable. And I thought, but I didn't hear from you any ugh, which I would have expected.
Yeah, no, I think because well, I felt it was historically accurate, right? And it was very unusual at the time. You know,
that happened?
Yeah, because, you know, like, I mean, this whole idea, for example, of
it seemed like such an invention.
No, things like that did happen, very much so. And it was very unusual, because, you see, now those things happen, but it's very different for them to happen in a stadium, right? As opposed to, like, you know, a 1,500-seat theater or an 800-seat theater, yeah? So yeah, I didn't mind that. And of course it has also that kind of special resonance. I mean, you know, The Wizard of Oz is such a vehicle through which entire layers of gay culture are kind of conveyed. So, for example, you know that line where, you know, the film, there's the whirlwind, the tornado, you know, and the house crashes, and then they open the door and everything's in color. And she says, "Toto, I think we're not in Kansas anymore," right? Well, you know, kind of, that was one of those lines, like the Duchess and the Bishop, that could be used about everything, yeah, as the Duchess said to the Bishop. So, you know, you arrive at an S&M club or something, and go, "Oh, I think we're not in Kansas anymore," right? Or, you know, somebody, you know, puts on the wrong clothes. "Honey, you're not in Kansas." Yeah, like, it's a line that lends itself to everything, with a camp intonation, but also kind of, you know, as a way of transversing worlds, yeah, really. So I liked that the audience sang it back to her, yeah. You know, because she was also one of those figures that was kind of like a bridge figure. I do sometimes resist a gay reading of Garland, right? Because the thing is, I mean, she was the Queen's favorite performer, you know, she's that age, right?
Yeah.
So, she was a box office sensation throughout the 40s, really. One of the 2-3 women who would often make the top 10 box office charts, right? The films were entirely vehicles built around her. So she was a radio star, she was a recording star. She was as big as there was in the 1940s, which meant everybody loved Judy Garland, right? Kind of, so seeing her as a kind of, a gay figure or something, I think diminishes, and I use the word advisedly, kind of her significance in the culture as a whole. Yeah, which is not to say that she wasn't, a kind of a crucial figure, in an account of American kind of queer histories, but I think that, she was also significant, like Sinatra or Bing Crosby or people like that, in the culture as a whole. And those avenues are worth exploring as well as just, there's something kind of, and actually I think in the culture it's used as a way of diminishing, oh, she's a gay cult figure, as if she was only a gay cult figure, right? Or of significance only, to a particular kind of social formation. And I think, performers like that, who are part of the consciousness of an entire culture, for quite a long period, the way that she was, kind of, what she meant and how she meant and so on, is worth exploring, and not just kind of, a particular moment in that trajectory.
And I think that's not something that this film does at all. So it brings up and highlights, and to some degree slightly explores her significance to gay people and gay community, and it talks about her being obviously fabulously popular in England, and she has these huge crowds coming to her, and that's not a crowd full of gay people, that's just a crowd full of people who want to see her. But as far as her relationship with, or significance to, American audience and American culture goes, the film has no interest in any of that. It's you see her as a 14-year-old at the start with Louis B. Mayer, and it's all about her treatment by the industry. And then it's her 47 going to London because she doesn't have the opportunity in America right now. But it's not like, it is very clear that it's because, as you say, she's uninsurable and she's not reliable enough. No one will take the risk on her. No business person will. But there's nothing to say like, I'm not ashamed because audiences will still love you. There's nothing about that. The American culture, American audience does not exist in this film, really.
Yes. I think a little bit, because the opening sequences, in Brentwood in California, where she's turned out of her hotel.
Oh yeah.
And she goes to this very mod, party, with Liza Minnelli and so on, but she's homeless and she doesn't have a place to live, and So I think there is something in that, and of course historically she'd just been fired from the Valley of the Dolls. She was meant to be in that movie, and I suppose she needed the money, and so she agreed to do it. But then it really was very exploitative, because actually it was, the character that she was playing, one of the characters in the film was based on her. Yeah, I think the character of Neely, who was a drug addict and constantly taking pills and so on. So there was an element of exploitation in her casting, and she and she ended up getting fired from that film, which really kind of put a nail in the coffin of what work she can get, really. So she'd burned a lot of bridges by then. But I think that's something that you, as a person who knows something about Garland, can bring to that film, but the film itself doesn't kind of do it for you.
No. And what do you make of the film's approach to her husbands? For one thing, it only shows a couple.
I kind of...
So Sid is portrayed as a kind of an ex who she's battling with over custody.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they all stole her money. I mean, you have to imagine that this is somebody who, in the 1940s was one of the, highest paid film stars of the period, also making money off of radio, right? And then later on, she was one of the highest grossing concert performers and also recording artists of the period. You can imagine the millions and millions and millions, right? So, you know, to end up like destitute and homeless just a few years after, it's like people were robbing her left and right, yeah, and that included the husband. So there's a line there about, you know, Sid Luft, you know, spending all her money on the horses, right? Except, you know, he ended up with a house in Brentwood. She had nothing. So, yeah.
And then Mickey, who she marries during the course of the film, has all these sort of business ideas, but can't make any of them work. Particularly this one about this chain of, is it theatres or cinemas in America?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a stupid idea, right? Cinemas that would all be called Judy Garland, and they'd give her, you know, masses of money just to show up.
10% of the thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a ridiculous idea. And he's shown to be a dummy, like a good-looking dummy. My understanding is that he was gay, you know, but there's no indication of that in the film at all.
Right.
You know, and I could be wrong. Maybe he wasn't. Sid Luft also, you know, I didn't like the way the character is done. Or indeed, I mean, Rufus Sewell is always very charming. But, you know, Sid Luft was meant to be a real bruiser. Yeah, like kind of, you know, half gangster, you know. So that kind of thing doesn't come across in the performance either.
No.
Yeah. So.
And then right at the end, you know, so we've had the audience joining in on Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and it's, you know, we promise you won't forget me and all the thing from the trailer, and then the film paused.
Freezes.
It paused, and this is a digital projection, so the thing just paused for like 2 minutes and then went off.
Yeah.
And then we had all sorts of rigmarole with Cineworld staff coming in going, we're sorry about this, we're trying to get it back on, blah, blah, blah. And then when they finally got it back on after 15 minutes, it was literally 2 seconds and then cut to black.
I know.
Might as well. But, you know, that is... I mean, I've never seen that before. That is unfortunate, and it is one of those things, and it could have happened anywhere, and I don't know. But it was annoying. And then the film ends with the thing that says, Judy Garland died, age 47. These concerts were 6 months before her death. And then it ends with a quote from The Wizard of Oz, which is, a heart is not judged by how much you love, but by how much you are loved by others. Which is, I think the wizard says that at the end.
It's a stupid quote, because also it contradicts the movie. You know, because one of the things that, you know, the movie tries to convey is how much she loves. I mean, you know, she's doing it all for her children. Her children are her reason for living. Yeah, her children are the ones that kind of give sense to her life. She says, you know, I know she's been fired again and so on, but she says, no, really, I think I'm very lucky. I have 3 wonderful children. You know, it's like the children are the focus and center of her life. Yeah. So, you know, the idea that, you know...
Well, I think it's a stupid quote because, as I said to you, it's psychopathic. the thing is, it's the wrong way around. I think a heart is judged by how much you love, regardless of what other people think of you. And in this, you know, to judge a heart on how much you're loved by others, a psychopath can manipulate people into loving them. That doesn't mean they've got a good heart.
People loved Hitler.
I thought we'd get around to Hitler eventually. It did seem like a slightly... I mean, I know why the quote's in there. It's about heart and it's about love, and you kind of see the relationship, and obviously it speaks to her relationship with her audience and the fact that there were constantly people who loved her despite her problems. But it kind of rubbed me the wrong way slightly, because I just think I think the original line, actually, now I reflect on it, is the wrong way around. But, you know...
Anyway, it's characteristic of the film. You know, it's all the obvious, you know, and it doesn't kind of think things through to kind of bring other dimensions and layers and textures, you know, and complexities into the work.
What did you think of the separate, perhaps, to the camera work, but the visual aspect, kind of clothes, sets, the look of things?
I thought all of that was actually wonderful. Yeah, I did. I like the clothes. The clothes evoke the clothes she was wearing in that period. Very much. There's been great care taken with that. I like that they show us a bit Carnaby Street and that, because it actually explains some of those outfits. I think also her having been fired from Valley of the Dolls meant that she kept the wardrobe that was done for her, and actually, you know, what Renée Zellweger is wearing at the beginning of the film are films that evoke, those stage costumes that were also Valley of the Dolls costumes. So I think great care has been taken with all of that. And it kind of pays off. I still think, there are quite poor elements and choices. For example, one of the things that the film wants to make you feel is how alone she is. Yeah. So, you have her coming out of the theater at night. There's many shots of her in these rainy London alleyways looking for a phone or coming out of the stage door, right? And, you're meant to think, oh, she's so alone, right? And actually what you see is an overhead shot, seeing her from below in these empty streets, right? I think a more imaginative director would have taken that further, made it more operatic, brought something else to it. It's just the same static shot of her, alone on the street shot from above. From a middling distance. Not even from a great distance, or there's no variation in the distance, right? Kind of. So
I find it kind of effective, but not that expressive.
Exactly. Okay, that's a good way of putting it. So I think
the way you would expect it to be done.
I think the less you know about Garland, the more you might enjoy this film.
I think that's probably true, as we're speaking, because I really don't know that much about Judy Garland. And honestly, I think the only film of hers that I've seen all the way through is The Wizard of Oz, which I love. But even where else did she do? Meet Me in St. Louis.
Meet Me in St. Louis, A Star Is Born, The Harvey Girls, Easter Parade, Me and My Gal. I mean, classic after classic after classic.
Well, that's what they tell me. But so my familiarity with Judy Garland is much more as a kind of image and as a gay icon, and as the sort of the kind of easily parodied or impersonated figure that she became, and quite cruelly so. But she became in her later years. So none of that kind of rang hollow to me or anything like that, because I really didn't have that knowledge to base it on. So I let it away with all of that you might not have done.
One of the things that I was very disappointed at the film is, she was considered the entertainer of the century, the greatest live entertainer, right? Kind of, and her Carnegie Hall concert is legendary, right? And I think it was a 2 or 3 album set, and it was in the charts for years and years, right? And it's such a kind of legendary thing that Rufus Wainwright has been touring, the world with, doing the same concert that she did, the same set list, right? But kind of, his doing it for years and years and years, i.e., kind of live, she was meant to be like out of this world. You never get that feeling in the film that it's that kind of kinetic kind of character.
No. And actually, the feeling that you get as to why the audience in London is there for her and why it's selling out is not because of what she does, but of who she is. Yes. They want to see Judy, the star.
Yes.
Then it's not suggested that they're there for the wonderful performances that she gives.
Yes.
They're to see a star.
Yes.
Which I think is probably not fair.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there was a bit of that. You always want to see a star. But the thing is, she did have the reputation of being, the greatest, or, certainly amongst the greatest. But really, people would say she was the greatest live performer of her generation, So that doesn't come across.
So, anything else on your mind about the film?
No. I mean, just again, fair is fair. Kudos to Renée Zellweger, because... I was telling someone, she's one of my least favorite performers, really. That kind of closed-in, little tiny-eyed kind of manner thing.
There's a Family Guy clip about that you should see. It's about her being an anteater.
Okay. So she was really surprising, and I think she is truly great in this.
But apart from that, the film isn't really up to that much.
No, but it's not a horrific experience watching it. I mean, I also kind of mainly enjoyed it. But I don't think it's a very good movie. I think people will enjoy it a lot. Yeah. And I think Renée Zellweger is great.
I teared up at the end. Did you?
I did a little bit.
In Somewhere Over the Rainbow.
Yeah, I kind of.
I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah.
And actually, pretty much from the moment that she's in the phone booth on the phone to her daughter and basically having to kind of give her kids away.
Yes.
Which I thought, that really got me, and they're not in the same scene. It's her in a phone box because the kids in America. I thought that was.
She's great.
That was emotionally sort of wrenching.
Yes.
And then from there, pretty much straight into the song at the end, and then of course the film had to just stop the way it did, and it really, it was unfortunate, but God, it really killed the end of the film. That unfortunately,
it did. Yeah, it did.
But that's not the film's fault.
Yeah.
Anyway,
so
I kind of guardedly recommend it. I think it's got an incredible performance.
Yes. Actually, I think in that sense, one mustn't guardedly recommend it. I'm sure Renée Zellweger will come up for Oscars, and so this film for people who are interested in that kind of thing, it will become a must-see film because she truly is so great in it. In spite of the film not quite being worthy of the performance.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.